Hey friend, welcome to Self-Transformed, a podcast dedicated to transforming your health in less time and guilt-free through the power of habit hacking. This isn't your typical wellness podcast, friend, so hang on tight. I'm your host, Emily Nichols, habit and fitness coach and Taco Tuesday enthusiast. Hey, I know the struggle is real when it comes to taking care of you. As a busy working mom myself, my clients and I have felt physically and emotionally drained, but lack the time and confidence to actually make ourselves a priority. Plus, all the health advice out there is so confusing and overwhelming, right? Redefining what true health really means paired with habit strategy from the female perspective has been the key to empowering my clients and even myself to finally create a consistent, healthy lifestyle that doesn't feel hard or just like another thing on your long to-do list. I'm now on a mission to equip you with these same sustainable habit hacks and affordable tools to help reset your habits in any season of your life in order to help you thrive. So if you're ready to habit hack your health and create your transformation together, then let's do this. You're listening to episode 184 of Self-Transformed. Hey friend, welcome to the last episode of the show for 2022. Wow, what a year. I feel like this has been such a building year for Self-Transformed as we created the Transformation Shop. We founded the Habit Hacking Society. We are launching our brand new signature program, Habit Transformation Bootcamp. And when I think back to when I started this podcast 3 years ago, I really have to go back even further than that, back to September exactly of 2015. What happened that month was my husband came to me, and if you've listened to some OG episodes of Self-Transformed, you've heard our Whole30 story. But just to give you the Cliff Notes version, my husband was going through a time where sleep was an issue. He was working second shift, night shift, day shift, all the shifts, and his sleep was really suffering of it for a couple of years. He wasn't able to be active anymore. He gained a ton of weight and just didn't feel good mentally, physically, all the things. And here I am trying to climb the corporate ladder, trying to be like the Pinterest perfect mom, which there is no such thing. And I was dealing with all that stress and anxiety in really unhealthy ways. A lot of excess online shopping, a lot of cookies that I would hide, excess alcohol, and I really wasn't dealing with all the pressure I had on myself, but all the outside pressure coming at me too, and I wasn't dealing with it in really healthy ways. And my husband had heard of something called the Whole30 through his brother, and he printed off from the Whole30 website like day by day what to expect, what you take out, what you add back in during the reintroduction. And I'm looking through all this and I'm looking at him saying, no way, no way could I do this. Before that point, I was the person who would be like, I'm going to start like this squat challenge on Monday or do this diet on a Monday. And then by Friday, I wasn't doing it anymore. I just never had a plan in place. And being a busy working mom, as we talk about so much here on the show, we have to logistically have a plan in place. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this as a team because our family needed it. You know, we were at a pivotal point in our lives where it was like, wow, our kids are getting older. They see how we're living our lives and we're not thriving. We're just barely surviving each day. So September 1st, 2015, we started our first Whole30 together, and I haven't looked back since. So after that 30 days, my biggest transformation was bringing in healthier habits now to deal with that stress that I had. And magically, some of the stress started to kind of even out and heal out because I found healthier ways to deal with it, such as moving my body, fueling myself with nutritious, colorful foods, being okay having a taco and margarita, not just having all the tacos in like a pitcher of margaritas. You know, my husband, he went on to lose 50 pounds. He's a Boston Marathon qualified runner. it just transformed our lives. But what that did for me more than anything was empowered me. It empowered me and showed me, wow, I can do this. Look at me, I can do this. It didn't have to be all or nothing. I mean, with the Whole30, it is pretty strict. It's a 30-day elimination protocol where you systematically take things out of your diet, then systematically reintroduce them at the end. It's a really great protocol to kind of redefine what true food freedom means to you and see what foods are maybe great for you or not so great for you, physically, mentally, emotionally, all the above. But that was my biggest transformation, was how empowered I felt. I went on to be a fitness instructor. I went on to become a behavior change specialist because I was just geeking out on habits, because everything I was doing around food was a habit. And I want that for you too, my friend. When I was putting together Habit Transformation Boot Camp, now this has been years in the making. We've had a couple of other programs like Self-Transform You, some other one-on-one coaching availability, which is still there as well. But I was thinking, how can I give someone else that feeling of feeling empowered, not necessarily just through the Whole30, but by doing something where you are able to just track your own healthy habits for 21 days and have that same empowerment and keep going. So that's where Habit Transformation Bootcamp was birthed. You've been hearing me talk about it the past couple of weeks. We are starting this Monday, the 2nd. I only have a few spots left, my friend. So if you've been thinking about it, there's a link in the show notes. It's bit.ly/Habit Transformation Bootcamp. Send me an email. It's all linked in the show notes if you have any questions. But what this is, it's my new signature program. It is a 6-week live group coaching program. There's a one-on-one element to it. We'll do a couple of one-on-one calls together. There'll be live group coaching calls, self-paced modules, which will also be available audio only. And trust me, my friend, this isn't going to take up a ton of your time, because I know sometimes when you're looking at a program that might feel really overwhelming to you, because as we've been talking about, women have to do habits differently, which P.S. Atomic Habits for Women is only available until this Monday the 2nd, so go listen. It's linked in the show notes as well. That's a private podcast series, just a limited series I felt really called to put together for you. But at the end of the 6 weeks, what you're going to have is a healthy habit plan that you're going to be able to do consistently and with a flexibility mindset around it too. Because as women, we have to do habits differently. So you'll get to pick which track you want to do. You either do a movement, you do a food freedom, or a mindset track. And I have different habits around those different tracks to help you do that. Or if you want to add on a different layer of something that you personally want to do, we'll discuss that one-on-one. But you have a plan. Then you can start stacking new habits on after that time together and after using those tools. And my friend, you're going to feel so empowered and have a plan. You're going to have a plan to take you through and help you pivot as you go through different seasons of your life as well. I'm so excited for this. This was really called on to my heart. And like I said, I really sat down, thought back to what helped me have my biggest transformation. And it was the power of doing something with someone else, with my husband, which I don't recommend that for everybody, but it worked out for us for the Whole30. And then watch that, what I like to call a positivity snowball from there, because it impacted so much more than my life. It all really just started by what I was putting on my plate, but it was so much more than the food. So join us in Habit Transformation Bootcamp. And just a reminder, I do still do Whole30 coaching. You can grab the Whole30 Anytime course. I'm an advanced Whole30 certified coach and a plant-based Whole30 coach. I have those courses available if you need a little extra accountability if you are starting the January Whole30. Those are always available for you, my friend. Those are like the OG courses I first created, and I still offer them, and I love still working one-on-one with the clients who take those courses. But going back to the Whole30 and going back to the subject at hand today, we are talking about setting healthy boundaries. This is hard to do, right? When I was thinking about how I set boundaries now versus before I did my first Whole30, there was no such thing. I was a people pleaser. I had serious FOMO. Now I'm just okay, I'm okay saying no and no thank you and smiling and making that a full sentence, which I learned from our guests today. And I've also learned the power of JOMO. Have you heard of that? The joy of missing out and really focusing on what I personally need or what my family needs right now. And it's very, very empowering. And when I first started to learn to set boundaries, it was by doing the Whole30. Now, setting boundaries is a habit you can learn, and the more you do it, the easier it can become. And today's guest is going to help us learn how to make setting boundaries a habit in your life and do it in a way that feels very empowering for you. And as she says, it will set you free, which I love so much. So I am so excited to welcome Melissa Urban to Self Transform today. If you don't know who Melissa is the co-founder and CEO of the Whole30 and an authority on helping people create lifelong healthy habits. She's a 7-time New York Times best-selling author, including the book we're talking about today, The Book of Boundaries. She's been featured all over like People Magazine, Good Morning America, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, etc. And when I tell Melissa this when we start our conversation today, she was one of the first people when I started my podcast. I wrote down like a dream list of guests, and she was at the top of that list. And what better way to end 2022 with one of my dream guests was someone that has really inspired me. And it just goes to show that ripple effect you can have. You know, if Melissa didn't start the Whole30, I might not have my podcast today. And that's a really big statement to say, but I probably would have never done the Whole30 or something similar to like that. Or maybe I would have never finished and felt something so empowered as I do now that led me to keep layering on more habits and digging deeper into habit strategy. And I'm just so grateful and thankful for the Whole30 and what it has done for my family's life, not just by doing that 30-day protocol, but empowering me to be the best version of myself and not only help myself thrive, but my family too. And that's what I want for you as well. So Melissa's going to give us some really great tips on how to set boundaries, something I know that's really difficult to do, but you're going to feel super, super empowered again to start setting boundaries today and see how freeing it will be. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode. I'll share my 3 biggest takeaways. As always, get a pen and paper handy, my friend. Let's go. Enjoy this conversation with Melissa Urban. Okie dokie, gang. Thank you so much again for tuning in to Self Transformed. I am delighted, excited to have Melissa Urban on the show. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, Emily, it's good to talk to you.
So I want to share something with you before we start. So I started my podcast 3 years ago, and I was just, doing like a big brain dump on a pad of paper, just all the folks I've wanted to have on there. And you were one of the very first names I wrote. So I'm really excited to have you on here. It's like, let's go.
I'm so glad you reached out.
Yeah. Well, the first question I ask every single guest is, what comes to mind when you hear the phrase self-transformed?
I've been thinking about this because I know you ask everybody, and I think there could be such a broad range. But when I think about the idea of self-transformation, I think about the very small things that I can do for myself just in this moment to self-reflect, to look at what I need, to look inward, to get in touch with my feelings, with my body, and make one tiny decision that serves me, that benefits future me. I think so often we think about this idea of self-transformation as this like before and after. Before, and then so many years down the road, dramatically changed whatever, all of the work that comes in between. And it can feel so intimidating, this idea that we have to completely transform everything about our life or everything about who we are. And I think I'm on a constant journey of self-transformation just by checking in with myself and my needs and making decisions based on that, just small things.
Yeah. It's hard sometimes to reflect inward, but I love how you mentioned it's just tiny. Because sometimes when we are trying to like change, we want to do it all and then we self-destruct and then we start that shame cycle, all the things. So thank you for sharing that with me. I love hearing everyone's opinion on that because it's completely different every time, which I totally love. So Melissa, let's hear a little bit more about you. I'd love to, for folks that maybe aren't super familiar with you, which I don't know, like if they've been living on a rock. Where can, I'm sorry, my phone was ringing.
Yeah, no worries.
Where does your story start? Thinking of your transformation, what has led you to really who you are and what you do today?
I mean, if we're going to talk about transformation, people will often look at me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Whole30. I've written New York Times bestselling books on the subject, and they'll go, "Oh, you must always have been like really healthy." No, my background actually I spent most of my early 20s as a drug addict. So I had, 5 years where I spent really addicted to drugs, and my life had very much fallen apart. And it wasn't until the year 2000 that I went through rehab for the second time and entered into my recovery. And that second time through was when I realized that I really had to change everything about my life in order to stay in recovery. And it wasn't like I had to do it all at once, but what I really needed to do was shift into a growth mindset. This idea that even though I was just a couple days out of rehab and I still felt like this worthless person who had nothing positive to contribute to society, I had to tell myself that I was a healthy person with healthy habits, and I had to look for behaviors in myself to support that. That was the way that I was going to maintain my recovery. And that's what led to me eating healthier and going to the gym and making new like-minded friends and finding a new job. And I changed my clothes and I changed the music I listened to. Over the course of the next few years, I would develop this radical self-transformation as a means of supporting myself in my recovery. And that's what led me to Whole30 in 2009. And the Whole30 is what led me to the book of boundaries this past year. But it really all started where a lot of people start when it comes to transformation, which is this profound moment of crisis where you realize that something has to change.
And this wasn't overnight, right?
No. I mean, no, I've been in recovery for 22 years now.
Right.
So it's been a huge journey. I didn't found the Whole30 until my 9th year in recovery. So this was a real process and a slow process, and one that required a lot of therapy and several steps forward and a couple steps back. The one consistent thing is that over the course of the last 22 years, I haven't used drugs. So that's been my foundation.
Yeah. I love that story so much. And, before we hit record, I was kind of just telling you a little bit more about the show. And I feel like the show came about for me just through the Whole30 experience myself and learning more about I remember just reading in the book and you saying a lot, like, I am a healthy person with healthy habits. And I was just like, okay, that sounds so much more simple than I'm going to do this. And it really launched my whole concept and my whole coaching method of thinking about just how can we make healthy habits work in our life to help us live as the best version of ourselves, right? And that takes time, and that's a journey. And I bet you never thought you would write a book about boundaries when you started the Whole30, but I know just from doing Whole30s, from coaching folks through the Whole30, that is like boundaries 101. You turn into saying no into a habit that you practice over and over. And you're like, oh, what else can I say no to? What else can I, set a boundary with? But that's really hard. And I see setting boundaries as such a high form of self-care, but it's something we really, really struggle with. So I really want to dig deeper into boundaries, since you are like the boundary queen or the boundary lady, is that what everyone is calling you?
That's what people on Instagram, that's what their spouse knows me as. They're like, oh, you got that answer from that boundary lady on Instagram, didn't you?
I love that. Well, let's start really simple. I feel like people talk about boundaries. Oh, we need to set boundaries. But what is a boundary? Let's start simple.
I think we should, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about boundaries. I think people hear the word and they generally just feel like icky, like, oh, even just the word makes me feel guilty. I think a common misconception is that boundaries are about controlling other people or telling other people what to do. And that could not be further from the truth. Boundaries don't tell other people what to do. They tell other people what you are willing to do to keep yourself safe and healthy. And I also think people look at boundaries as somehow putting up a wall between relationships, like you're pushing other people away, holding them at a distance. But really, boundaries are designed to make the relationship better. They are designed to prevent you from showing up in your relationships resentful or frustrated or anxious or begrudgingly or angry because you have this limit that you haven't expressed, and the other person doesn't realize that you have a limit that they've been overrunning. And now when you get together, they keep taking advantage and you don't say anything and you keep showing up. Now you are cold and you are distant and you are anxious. A boundary says to the person in your life, look, I've got this limit. I'm going to express it to you clearly and kindly, probably because you didn't even know I had it. And I'm going to invite you to meet me in this limit. And if you do, our relationship will be so much more trusting, so much more open. I'll be able to show up as my fullest self happily, without resentment, feeling trust, feeling respect. In that capacity, boundaries are a real gift for your relationship. They are invitations, not walls.
They are invitations, not walls. And I think a lot of times if you make it about you, it doesn't come across so harsh to that other person. Like, this is why I need my boundary. And I love how you mentioned a lot in the book, clear is kind. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah. So clear is kind is a phrase that I am borrowing from Brene Brown in her book, Dare to Lead. But Brene is borrowing it from the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So she and I have recovery in common. And it's a phrase that essentially says clear is kind. It is not kind if I expect you to read my mind. If I say something passive aggressive and then expect you to respond to that or figure it out. If I don't say anything and then I show up coldly or angrily, or I get mad at you when you don't get it right, that's not kind. What is kind is sharing my needs and my feelings and what I ask of you clearly. If we each just speak, and like, this is my relationship golden rule, say what you mean and trust your partner to do the same. If we just speak clearly and tell each other how to support each other, how to show up for each other, what I'm feeling, what I need in the moment, like, I swear it's 70% of my relationship issues go away if we just speak clearly in my relationships.
Totally. I know there's been times I've said to my husband, well, I need you to do this, or it really helps me when you do this. And I feel like I'm coming like, oh, this is going to be a big conversation. And he's just like, okay, sure. And I'm like, oh, well, that was easy.
I know. I always tell people, go into these boundary conversations expecting the best, because most of the time it is that easy. People just didn't know. So if you say, hey, would you start calling before you come over? And then they're just going to say, yeah, sure, no problem. And now all of a sudden you've got this limit established that makes you feel so much more free. And now they know how to show up. And when they get to your door, you're not going to be like, oh, hey, okay, I guess now's an okay time, you know?
Well, it's mostly women that listen to my show. And I feel like they're listening and they're like, okay, that's really great. But I feel bad if I have to set a boundary by saying no to somebody, or if I'm setting a boundary and maybe it feels selfish of me that I'm putting my needs over someone else's. How do we overcome that through the work of setting boundaries?
I mean, I think first we have to like unlearn where that comes from. So as women, especially as moms, we have been conditioned by the patriarchy and stereotypically rigid gender roles, very often religious influences, even diet culture, to not have needs, right? As moms, I am praised the most when I am selfless, when I put everybody else's needs and feelings above my own. Do I even show up on my own list? If I do, I'm dead last. And we have to unlearn this idea that like my needs are not worthy, my needs are not valid, my feelings aren't valid, and that it is somehow like mean or selfish to even have needs. You know, Glennon Doyle says, be willing to disappoint other people before you disappoint yourself. And when you think about the idea of expressing a need or a feeling and setting a limit in a relationship as a means of showing up in that relationship more openly, more trustingly, more vulnerably, more, closer, then it really does become a gift. But I think women have to unlearn and constantly remind ourselves, like, my needs matter too. My feelings matter too. I should be on my own list.
And that's a mindset reset shift that that almost has to be a habit in itself. Like I said, like the more like I think you do it, set a boundary and be like, oh, well, that wasn't so hard. The more it becomes a habit that you're more comfortable with. It doesn't feel so icky, right?
Yes. So definitely practice. It is a practice. It will always be a practice. Even for me, sometimes when I set a limit, I will start to set a limit by saying, I'm sorry, but, and then I'll pause and I'll say, excuse me, I need you to call before you come over, or that's not a good day for me. Can we find another time? So I don't need to apologize for my limits. They just are what they are. I also, though, want to remind people it's wonderful when those conversations go well. If you say, please don't comment on my body. Let's talk about your vacation instead. How did it go? And the person just changes gears and changes subjects. And now you don't have to have this conversation that you find triggering. Amazing. But if you are at a family dinner and somebody brings up politics and you say, oh, could we please change the subject? Nobody enjoys talking about politics at the dinner table. And they refuse. You now have the responsibility and the right to hold your own limit by saying, okay, if we won't change the subject, I'm going to excuse myself from the table then. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to go make a phone call. So your boundary and your confidence in your boundary can't depend on someone else to respect it. You have to be able to set a limit that you are willing to enforce. And then you have to remind yourself in the moment that you are worthy of enforcing it, because the opposite or the alternative is letting someone else talk about whatever they want to talk about and forcing yourself to take it, even though it's hurting your mental health. And that's not a healthy place to be for you or for the relationship.
Well, and it's thinking about, okay, am I sparing their feelings and sitting here just feeling totally terrible about this because of the way they're making me feel? Like, how would I want someone to respond to me if I was doing that to them? Right. And
yeah,
you said just physically removing yourself or taking that next step, that's going to go a long way.
And what ends up happening is we don't say anything. We just we hold our tongue, we keep the peace, we let the person run us over. And then what happens? One of two things. Either one, we explode. The 10th time they do it, we haven't said anything, and we just absolutely explode all over them in a way that is probably not kind, in a way that may seem like it's coming out of left field to them because you haven't said anything before, and in a way that does damage the relationship. Or you get up and you leave the table and you think, I'm never going over to my mom's for dinner again. I'm just not. I'm not going to go. It's not worth it. When really there are so many things like in between those scenarios where it's like, but if you just said something, you could set the limit around this one conversation topic, and then you get to enjoy the rest of your visit, the rest of your dinner, the rest of your conversation. So they really are, again, a gift to you and to all of your relationships.
Totally. Okay, Melissa, how do we know when we need to set a boundary with someone? I feel like there's a feeling you probably have, but I also want to take it to the next step after we explore this and think about how we need to maybe set boundaries with ourselves sometimes too.
Okay, so everyone listening, I want you to imagine a person. And when you think of this person, you just have this sense of like dread, anxiety, like I want to avoid this person. When their name comes up on your cell phone, you just don't even want to open it. When they walk by your cube at work, you turn away and pretend you're on the phone. That sense of dread, anxiety, that idea of like, I just don't want to, avoidance, that's the first red flag that a boundary is needed. And that can be around a specific person. Maybe it's a conversation topic. Maybe it's a time of day or situation. But that sense is a huge red flag. This idea that, you don't feel good when you're with this person, or you walk away not liking who you are when you're with this person. If you can't show up as your fullest self, if you have to show up in some version of you that they approve of, and that's the only way they accept you, that's a sign that a boundary is needed. If you've considered taking a break from someone, those are all red flags that you need to set a boundary either around a specific scenario, conversation, or with a person in general.
Okay, real quick. I know you have felt this way before too. You start a new healthy habit routine and you find a good flow, but then life gets in the way and you find yourself in a new season of life or a new year, and that healthy habit routine just isn't working for you anymore. Instead of just giving up, join me for the next live Healthy Habit Reset, January 10th, 11th, and 12th at 12 p.m. Eastern. So during the reset, you will learn the simple 5-step habit change method that I only share in this masterclass, where I take the overwhelm and confusion out of health and teach you how to reset your habits for whatever season of life you are in. The new year is a really great time to reevaluate what habits are working for you or not. And of course, we're going to have a heavy dose of habit strategy from the female perspective. Okay, and I know what you're thinking. how long is this going to take me? I know your time is precious. So each day will only be there for about 15, 20 minutes max, and replays will be sent out to you. Plus, I'll have a workbook to help you take action so it won't take up a ton of your time. So go to bit.ly/healthy habit reset to sign up and reserve your spot. I'll see you inside of the reset. All right, let's get back to the show. Now, what about setting a boundary with yourself? I think this one's tricky.
It is a little tricky. It's also incredibly powerful, though, because boundaries with yourself are something that you can do immediately in the moment, does not rely on anyone else's cooperation or respect, that will immediately buy you back time, energy, capacity, mental health, physical safety, physical space. The same sense of dread or anxiety can be used when you think about a boundary with yourself. Is there a particular time of day, situation that you find yourself in, scenario? Maybe it's a piece of technology where you get that same sense of either dread or anxiety, like you feel like you get sucked in and can't suck your way back out. That's really common with technology. Maybe it's like every Monday morning, like Sunday night, you're in full Sunday scaries mode and you hate Sunday nights because you know what your Monday morning's going to look like. Can you set a boundary with yourself around Sunday night or Monday morning to kind of ease your way into that? Maybe your boundary is, I don't schedule meetings before 9 a.m. on Monday, so I can get into the office and have an hour just to myself to straighten my desk and check off my tasks. Maybe it's, I don't leave the office until on Friday, until I've made a list of the first 3 things that are at the top of my list for Monday morning, which makes me feel better. Maybe I don't check my phone first thing in the morning. I don't look at email or Slack or text messages until I've done my hour-long morning routine. I've gotten up, I've done a little workout, I've taken a shower, and I've eaten breakfast, because that makes me feel like I'm starting my day proactively instead of reactively. Those are all examples of boundaries you can set with yourself when you recognize that part of your life is not going the way that you want it to.
I love that. I know a lot of folks struggle with setting boundaries with scrolling their phone and with social media, and a lot of activities we do with our clients is like a habit inventory. Like we'll write down every single thing we do in a day, how long it takes. And we find a lot of time wasters in our day. And a lot of times it comes with scrolling social media. And even I check in about every couple of months with myself, and I'll find myself, man, I'm just really getting sucked into like watching funny dog reels. It's just what Instagram has figured me out. It's like funny dog videos and like cooking, but that's it, which I don't mind that. But, I've set a limit. Your phone now can give you a little signal like, oh, you've reached your time limit for the day. And for me, that's like, okay, I need an actual extra step to remind me, okay, here's my little, trigger to be like, okay, it's time to put this down and get back to what being more present in that moment. And it's really powerful to be able to do something like that, because when that notification comes up, I'm like, I have to put my phone down. Okay, what am I going to turn to instead? And like, I think we need to celebrate ourselves for doing that and be like, I'm really proud of myself for doing that.
Oh, absolutely. So, I think you can set boundaries with technology around how much you use them. Maybe it's when you use them. So for me, I know scrolling anything before I go to bed is just a hard no. I know that it winds me up. It helps. It like doesn't make me sleep well. I can easily get sucked into like taking, it's 5 minutes now and then it's an hour. So could you charge your phone outside of your bedroom? Could you just not even have a plug in your bedroom, and your plug is in your kitchen and you don't even bring the phone in, so that when you automatically reach over to, scroll your phone, it's not there. And then you're reminded, oh yeah, this is a habit I'm trying to change, and it will change very quickly. Can you think about maybe your boundary isn't around how much time you're spending, but who you're following? Are you following people that make you feel less than good about yourself, who are just making you outraged? Are you following people you feel like you have to because you know them in real life, but you don't want to follow their content for reasons that have nothing to do with them and everything to do with you? Like unfollow. We should all have like an unfollow Friday campaign where we go through our feed and we're like, nope, this isn't serving me anymore. So I think there are a lot of ways we can approach these conversations. And I like to talk about in the book, you can do it any way you want. If the idea of a timer doesn't work for you, try to find a different solution. Like I only watch Netflix when I'm folding laundry or organizing my bedroom. And that's like a really fun way for me to, watch some of these like guilty pleasure shows and not feel like I'm getting sucked into the scroll or wasting my time.
Yeah. That's really important to point out too. Like you can try different ways to set boundaries with yourself, and if this way doesn't work, okay, I'll try this way. Or maybe it wasn't the time it was, maybe it was who I was following. I'm a big fan of unfollowing people or silencing people or
yeah. Yeah,
All
that
the
mute
above.
button is brilliant. Yes.
All the above, all the above. So, when thinking about, I remember you doing this on Instagram before you announced the book. And I was so excited to see in the book how you had like the green, yellow, and red scripts for when you are trying to set a boundary with someone. It's a really nice visual, and I think it's a really great way for you to practice how to actually voice saying a boundary. Because it made me think back to doing my first Whole30. There was tons of examples of this is how you say I'm doing the Whole30 right now, and blah 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 blah. And I would actually like practice saying it out loud to myself, and I do that with all other type of things now too. But can you kind of explain that? Maybe we can even give everyone an example of what a sample like green, yellow, red script would look like.
Yeah, I've been using the green, yellow, red framework since the earliest days of Whole30. So, I mean, this is like a decade in the works, but my general boundary philosophy is you want to go in with the minimum effort to get maximum effect. So I want you to go in with the gentlest, kindest boundary language possible. It's still clear, but it's gentle and kind. And if that gets the job done, that's a win-win. So that would be the green boundary language. It is, again, so if the conversation is around your mother-in-law dropping over without calling, the green boundary would be, hey, Carol, would you please call before you come over and give us at least an hour's notice? That's the green. It's very kind. It's very gentle. Maybe Carol didn't realize that you would just rather she call. And Carol says, okay, no sweat. Now, if Carol shows up on your door a week later without calling because she was in the neighborhood, you're going to need to escalate your boundary language to yellow. The threat to your relationship now is escalated, meaning if Carol keeps showing up on your porch, it's really going to hurt your relationship. So the yellow boundary might be answering the door and saying, oh, Carol, you didn't call and it's not a good time. Would you like to come back over on Saturday? We're free on Saturday and would love to see you. Or should I call you later on tonight and we can work out a time for you to visit? You hold the boundary while acknowledging, like, I understand that you want to have a relationship with us. We're going to facilitate that, but it has to be at a time that works for both of us. If Carol shows up on your door again, after you've had these conversations several times and you've reinforced the boundary, and now she's just willfully disrespecting this limit, the red boundary is you don't answer the door. The red boundary is the boundary. It is the action that I am going to take to preserve this relationship, because if I let Carol in right now, I am going to scream at her and I'm going to be so mad and probably say things I don't mean. So I'm just going to not answer the door. So that is the escalation of my boundary framework. And for every script I offer in the book, you have this green, yellow, red, so you know what to do in the face of pushback.
Oh, Carol.
I know. I use a different name every time I give that example. Sometimes it's Barbara. And I try, every time I hear from someone named Carol who's like, I'm a good Carol. And I'm like, I'm sure you are. Carol. I know you are.
Well, and like you said, it's almost like it's a threat level to your own mental health or your safety and everything. And it's like, okay, I have to, really think about escalating this because they're not respecting my boundary, and you're being more and more clear. So in a way, you're being more and more kind, right?
Yes. I'm giving Carol so many opportunities. We want to visit with you. We want your visits to feel really good and happy and relaxed. And when you show up without calling, they don't. And it affects me, and it affects the kids, and it affects my relationship with my spouse, your, kid, and it affects my relationship with you. And if you would just call, which is a very reasonable request, all of this would feel so much better to everybody.
I feel like this could be like a whole TikTok series, Carol.
I know. I think there is one actually already. I'm already working on.
There you go.
I'm already working in the in-law space on TikTok. Yes.
Oh golly. Oh gosh. Okay. Luckily, I have a great mother-in-law. So
I do too.
You don't need to have a Sandy in there. Well, I love what you have done with the Book of Boundaries, and I think it's really great work, and I think it's a really great habit and a form of self-care. A lot of us have to, like you said, practice and just try over and over again. And I love how, the book is called the Book of Boundaries, but you have set the limits that will set you free. And I love that play on words, because you may be setting a limit, but it's so freeing at the same time. I love how you did that.
Yeah, there it really is. When I talk to my community about the benefits of boundaries, the first thing people go to is, well, it helps me alleviate my anxiety. It helps me not feel resentful, not feel anxious, not show up begrudgingly. But the more you dive into the practice, the more you realize that boundaries bring a tremendous sense of freedom into your life and into the sense of trust and respect and vulnerability that you can feel in a relationship. They're guardrails. They're just healthy guardrails.
I love this. Well, everyone listening, you can go find the Book of Boundaries everywhere, right? I've been seeing it everywhere. I saw it at Target the other day. I meant to take a picture, which is
I'm
so
seeing it in
fun.
airports now, which is so fun.
Which is
My
so
local
fun.
Targets. Yeah, you can find it anywhere.
Does that still just kind of like, oh my gosh, when you see your book out in the wild?
Yeah, I definitely had a moment where I was like in tears in the Phoenix airport because it was the first time I had seen it in the airport during my book tour. And there was nobody else there. And I'm texting my editor and she was like, just go tell somebody, like, that's my book. And I'm like, there's no one like in the store for me to tell. So I signed a copy and I took a picture. But yeah, it's always very thrilling.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. Where can everyone connect with you, learn more about setting boundaries, and of course, the Whole30 as well?
Yes, of course. You can find me at Melissa Yu on Instagram. My website is melissau.com and I'm Melissa_U on TikTok. So we can hang it over there too.
Wonderful. Melissa Urban, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks, Emily. Good to chat with you.
Wow, Melissa, thank you so much for this conversation. Friends, do you feel ready to set some boundaries? I sure hope so. Let's talk about my 3 biggest takeaways from this conversation with Melissa Urban, author of the Book of Boundaries. So, number 1, this kind of gave me chills when she said this. Boundaries are invitations, not walls. Ooh, I love that. Let me say that again. Boundaries are invitations, not walls. So you have to extend those invites to set boundaries to really have better relationships with the ones you love, right? You have a limit, like Melissa said, that sometimes or a lot of times people keep stepping over. And the more you don't say anything, what that does, you're going to show up with resentment, frustration. You're not going to have that clear, open communication you have with your loved ones that both of you deserve. So you're not putting up a wall. You're putting up a wall if you don't set a boundary. Okay? If you're showing up, like she said, you have that dread, that anxiety about some type of situation with a person. Next time, think of it. I'm going to extend an invite to set a boundary. That way you can crumble that wall down. I love that so much. Number 2, there is no need to feel bad about setting boundaries because, like Melissa said, borrowed from Brene Brown, the 12-step program, clear is kind. It is so much more kinder to extend that invitation. I like that, to set a boundary with someone. It's just so much more clear and it's just so much more kind because then they know what that limit is. And like Melissa said, a lot of times people are just like, oh, okay. And we get inside our own heads and we make it a lot bigger of an issue than what it needs to be. And I know a lot of times as women, especially as moms, we feel bad or we feel selfish if we have to say no when we set a boundary, for example. This is a practice we need to unlearn and to overcome that mindset. We have to practice that. One of the biggest ways I learned to say no was when I was doing the Whole30. I remember Melissa saying lots of times, no can be a complete sentence. I think we've had an actual episode on the power of saying no and how it can be clear and kind. But the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit and you'll become more comfortable with it, right? Then think of it this way. You could totally permanently damage your relationship with that person you love if you don't say anything. And if it makes it a little bit more easier, make it about you, not them, right? They're going to be a lot more open to that type of communication for sure when you're setting that boundary. And then lastly, I love this as a habit to practice, is to set a boundary with yourself. Ooh, we talked a lot about social media. That's something I'm personally setting a boundary with and thinking about in the new year. Like I mentioned, I have a trigger set up on my phone to let me know when I've reached an hour on social media. And then I'm like, oh, I'm done. I'm done. That's all I get. That's all I get. I got to post and go. I got to post and go and not get caught up in all the fun dog videos I like to watch. So you can do it in the moment. There's no accountability other than yourself, which can be a little tricky as well. But setting up some type of trigger, if you have that same sense of dread or anxiety like you do with a person with maybe some type of event, or you feel that feeling after looking at something, doing something, then you can start setting that boundary with yourself as well. So many different directions we could go with this. I could have talked with Melissa forever about setting boundaries, and we could have got into the Whole30 and habits even more, but I really wanted to focus on talking about boundaries today. It's something we've talked about in passing here on this show, and what better person, what better expert than the boundary lady herself, Melissa Urban. So gang, I will link everything in the show notes so you can give Melissa a follow and go get your own copy of the Book of Boundaries. I loved listening to it. You know me, I like to listen to my books on Audible, and Melissa does a really great job if you are a Audible listener like myself as well. So gang, 2022 has been a great year. I hope you add setting boundaries to your new year, not necessarily resolutions, but who you want to be in the new year. You want to be a healthy person with healthy habits that sets boundaries. I love that for you so much. One of the ways we can do this is to come join us in Habit Transformation Boot Camp. Like I said, we start next week on the 2nd. We'll take registrations up until a couple days after that. So go to the link in the show notes. And again, if you're starting the Whole30 next week, you can grab that Whole30 Anytime course, because I hope this story has shown you the power of changing just one habit, which is what we're doing in Habit Transformation Boot Camp, whether that be movement, mindset, or food freedom, can have a lasting effect and transform not only your life, but your family's life as well. Melissa, thank you so much again for this conversation. Y'all, I'll see you in 2023. I'm so blessed that you listened to this show. I'm so grateful for you. Have a happy new year. I'll see you in 2023. Hey girl, real quick before you go, if you want some free motivation texted to you every week to help you habit hack your health, send me your favorite emoji to 773-904-2157 to sign up for my weekly pump-up texts. I can't wait to catch up with you there. And if you have any quick questions for me or feedback, it's me on the other end, so text me back, friend. And if you love the show, the number one way you can thank me is to leave a rating and review in iTunes. That way more mamas can find the show. Tag me in your Instagram stories at EmilyNichols22 what you love about the show. Show me your review so I can shout you out. Love and appreciate you, friend. I'll see you next time.